Very good morning and welcome back to session 2 of day 3 program. We have with us Professor Kanishka Biswas from JNCSR. Now I request Dr. Archana, Research Assistant Professor, Department of Physics and Nanotechnology, to introduce the speaker and chair this session. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, sir. I am very happy to introduce Professor Kanishka Biswas. Professor Kanishka Biswas had obtained his Master of Science and PhD degree in the year of 2009 from the Indian Institute of Science under supervision of Professor C.N.R. Rao. And he had his postdoctoral research in the year of 2009 to 2012 with Professor Mercury G. Constadis in Northwestern University, USA. He is working as an associate professor in Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research, Bangalore. Now, he is pursuing research in solid state, inorganic chemistry, thermoelectrics, 2D materials, topological quantum materials, and perovskite halides. He has published more than 147 research papers, 2 books, 7 book chapters, and 3 patents. And he has citation over 11,500, and he has the H index of about 46. He is recipient of Material Science Annual Prize by ICSC, Materials Research Society of India. And also, he had received many awards and fellowships such as Swarna Jayanti Fellowship from DST in the year of 2019, Bronze Medal from Chemical Research Society of India, CRSI, in the year of 2019, and Medal from MRSI in the year of 2017, and while a Young Scientist Research Award from IUMRS ICAM, Japan, in the year of 2017. Also, he had the Young Scientist Medal from Indian National Science Academy in the year of 2016, IUMRS, MRS Singapore Young Researcher Merit Awards in the year of 2016, and so on. He is an associate editor of ACS Applied Energy Materials, American Chemical Society from the year of 2018. He is serving as an advisory board member of various journals, including Journal of Solid State Chemistry, the LCOA group, and the Journal of Materials Chemistry, RSC, and iSciences, and which is in the press. With this introduction, I hand over the session to the speaker. Sir, please.
Sorry, thank you very much for this introduction, and then of course many thanks for inviting me to give this seminar. But I would love to go to SRM personally, but of course it's not possible, as you know. Like we have to listen online. I hope my slides are visible, right?
Yes, sir. It's visible for us.
Okay. So I think also you made me co-host for this seminar, and then there are several people we have to admit in Zoom, like they are waiting in the waiting room. Okay. So
yes, sir.
The other co-host, please take care of that one. Otherwise, yes, it's popping up in my screen. Keep on popping up in my screen. Okay. So I'll start with that. Okay. So today, just a moment. Today I'm going to talk about this topic: crystalline solids with intrinsically low thermal conductivity for thermoelectric energy conversion. So this is very interesting topic of research, because as we know, all of us know that glass is an amorphous material and which shows ultra low thermal conductivity. But today I'm going to talk about crystalline solids which shows intrinsically low thermal conductivity, which is actually contradictory. And those materials are important, and this is the most important part, crystalline part. Okay, those materials are important for thermoelectric energy conversion. Okay, so now here you can see what is thermoelectric. So most of us knows what is thermoelectric, because all of us read about thermoelectric in the, oh my god, sorry, yeah. So please admit the participants, okay, because it's popping up in my screen otherwise. Yeah. So this thermoelectric effect is a direct conversion of temperature difference to electric voltage and vice versa. And thermoelectric effect is basically divided in 2 effects. The primarily it is based on Seebeck effect and also based on Peltier effect. And Seebeck effect is basically when we have temperature difference like T1 and T2, hot end and cold end. This is T2. This is near to say room temperature. from this temperature difference, we can generate this inorganic semiconductors like P and N type semiconductor can generate voltage. Okay, so now basically the Seebeck coefficient is nothing but how much voltage one material is generating per unit temperature difference. So this delta T matters, but this delta V, how much it generates, it depends on the semiconductor property P and N type material. And please note that these semiconductors are joined in electrical series but thermally parallel. Okay, so that should be the device geometry for thermoelectrics. And the opposite effect of Seebeck effect is basically known as Peltier effect, which is well known. As you can see, so as you can see, this is the voltage. If we provide voltage externally, and this same device geometry actually yeah. So please, this thing is popping up. Keep on popping up like this. Waiting room on my screen. Okay, please take care from the other end. Otherwise, it's like a bit.
Sure, sir. Yeah, we'll take care, sir.
Yeah. So basically, this voltage we externally provide the voltage, and then the same device geometry actually give rise to temperature difference. And this hot end generally is the near room temperature end, and the cooling end can be used for refrigeration application. And this Peltier effect has many application till now in last 40 to 50 years, because many of our scientific instruments require cooling, which have Peltier cooling devices. So this has already have significant amount of application. Even household fridge, small fridge can be made by Peltier cooling application. So this is a real thermoelectric device. It looks like this, and there are several P-type and N-type legs which are connected in a series, as I told you, and with that it can generate actually voltage from if we give a temperature difference. So we have to create basically this delta T, which is extremely important. So now here I'll show a small experiment which is done by my PhD student, and you can see there are two beakers. The first beaker has ice cold water, which is generally have temperature around 10 degrees centigrade, and another beaker will put hot water, and we have a fan with motor, and this is connected with a thermoelectric device. So let's see, let's go to the real experiment. So this is cold water and this hot water. We have a temperature difference around 60 to 70 degree, 60 degrees from hot water and cold water, and we are going to connect fan with the thermoelectric device. Okay, so the thermoelectric device is here, very small one inside this plate, the white one I'm pointing out here. This is the thermoelectric device here, basically here. Okay, and from the 60 degree temperature difference, actually this thermoelectric device actually can generate voltage. Basically from this delta T, it will generate delta V, and this voltage actually runs the fan. So you can see the power of this science and technology, like how from a simple temperature difference it can generate voltage. Okay, so now what are the uses of thermoelectric? Why we should do research in thermoelectric, not only in India but also in world? I'm sure in SRM, you have several few groups working actively in thermoelectrics. So if we see this total energy consumption curve in India as well as in world in 2018, we have we consume. So please note that this is the energy consumption curve. So we consume energy in terms of combustion of coal or combustion of petroleum and natural gas. Combustion of coal, hydro and nuclear actually generates the electricity which we use for day-to-day life and many other uses. A significant amount of electricity comes from our NTPCs, basically that is burning of coal. And then combustion of petroleum and natural gas actually runs the transportation and industrial sector. But after the enormous use of energy in terms of combustion of petroleum and natural gas as well as combustion of coal, we only use 35%. Basically, we only use 30 to 35%. But 65% utilized energy reject as a heat. So what do we do with this waste heat? So actually this thermoelectric material can convert this waste heat back to electricity. If we consider this waste heat end is T1, basically the hot end in the Seebeck coefficient, and this cold end can be near room temperature or lower temperature than the waste heat end. And these our semiconductors which we make in the lab. We generate semiconductor which can efficiently convert this waste heat to electricity. So that is the main motivation to do research in thermoelectric, and this has significant role in future energy conversion and management. So the research and opportunities is extremely important in thermoelectric energy conversion. Okay, so now what are the application in thermoelectrics? So this thermoelectric material can convert waste heat recovery and in power generation waste heat recovery, and it can generate power by Seebeck effect. In large scale, it can be used in power plants like chemical, thermal, nuclear, and steel power plants. So any kind of power plants which generate basically a lot of waste heat, thermoelectric device can be put there, and it can generate voltage out of it. And medium scale, it is already used in high-end cars of BMW, Ford, and General Motor, where exhaust pipe of the car, truck generates a lot of waste heat, which comes from combustion of petroleum or diesel. So this waste heat, which is generally 65 to 70%, can be converted by thermoelectric device or thermoelectric material to electricity, and this same electricity can charge the car battery. So you need basically a hybrid car to have this technology, and this technology already implemented in high-end car companies. So now, why this thermoelectric basically got popular in power generation application? The main example is basically space power generation, which is known for last 35 to 40 years by NASA and Jet Propulsion Laboratory from Caltech, and as well as Russian Space Foundation. So what they have done, and before what they have, I tell you what they have done before we have to understand the motivation. Because if you send the spacecraft in deep space mission, you have to generate power for this spacecraft, because it continuously takes photographs and send it to Earth. And this running of electronics and normal operation of spacecraft require power. And these spacecraft are generally they are in the space, deep space, in more than 30 to 35 years. Okay, so we need to generate continuous power for this spacecraft, but we don't need power to run this, but to run the electronics and daily needs, we need this spacecraft. So now power, and then so how to generate power if you go for a deep space mission, because you are going for like Mars or beyond. Basically, the sun intensity goes down like enormously, so people cannot use efficiently solar cell there in deep space mission. So what this NASA has done in 35 to 40 years back, they have created this seal tube, and inside the seal tube they have put plutonium-238, basically plutonium oxide they put it, which is a radioactive material, and this decays at least for 28 years, because this has a half-life of 28 years and gives rise to heat of 350 to 400 degrees centigrade. Okay, and this seal tube plutonium oxide gives heat for at least for 30 years. So we have a continuous heat source, and this heat seal tube is generally covered by these thermoelectric devices. This jacket is made of thermoelectric material or thermoelectric devices. So this continuously generate power for this spacecraft, and this technology is called radioactive thermoelectric generator, which is implemented by NASA for their several missions: Apollo, Pioneer, Viking, Voyager, Galileo, Cassini. So several missions they have implemented this technology. So that's why this thermoelectric become extremely popular research in US, and not only in US, even Europe, Japan, China. They are actively working in thermoelectric, and in India also there are several groups which are now focusing on thermoelectric technology and thermoelectric material as well as thermoelectric devices. So now, so what is next? So next is basically a new application is coming up based on this thermoelectric, is basically solar thermoelectrics. So now all of us knows what is solar cell. So solar cell can convert a light part of the solar by photovoltaic effect to electricity, right? So but there is significant amount of heat part is also there in solar. So now how to convert that heat part to the electricity? So now if we can combine solar cell with the thermoelectric devices, basically we can increase the efficiency enormously, because we can convert light and heat part both of the solar sun and convert it to the electricity. So the new technology is coming up based on thermoelectrics, is basically solar thermoelectrics. So now another modern use of thermoelectric would be recovery of waste heat from battery, because you know the batteries, lithium-ion battery is a really important area of research, and there are several important applications of lithium-ion battery, like all of us having mobile phone or laptop, and these gadgets are having a lithium-ion battery. But if you use for long, like a laptop, or if you talk more in phone, this phone or laptop heats up, right? So what do you do with this waste heat? Basically, we can convert this waste heat if we use thermoelectric device combined with lithium-ion battery. So this is the small scale use. But now we think about basically our government is going towards electrical mobility. So all cars will have lithium-ion battery. So this battery will generally heat up again, and this car heat can be also car or truck heat can be converted back to electricity by thermoelectric technology. And other than that, because we have basically, yeah. So somebody have a question?
Sorry, sir. Yeah, it's mistakenly. Sorry.
Okay. So, but feel free to ask question if you have question. Okay, I'll be happy to interact. Yeah, in between the talk also. So now basically like if you have all of the world is surviving on data centers, because we generate lot of data, and these data centers actually generates lots of heat every day. Okay. From different sources in the data center, and that can be also converted to electricity by this thermoelectric technology. So this thermoelectric power generation from waste heat is really powerful and very interesting area of research. So with this, we go to the fundamental part of this field, which is fundamental science, fundamental physics and chemistry, which is related to the thermoelectric figure of merit. Okay, so this thermoelectric figure of merit is a purposefully made dimensionless quantity, so that you can compare material A to material B to material C, which will have high ZT. That material is better. It can convert better waste heat to electricity. So let's see what is composed of ZT. We have Seebeck coefficient. I told you Seebeck coefficient is nothing but delta V by delta T. So how much voltage one material can generate per unit temperature difference. The unit is basically volt by Kelvin. Okay, so now, and this is the pure property of matter, solid matter, and which is related to the electronic structure of the solid. So electronic structure, how it is related, you can go through a simple solid state physics book, and then you can understand like how Seebeck coefficient is directly related to the electronic structure. So I have not much time to explain that, but I'd be happy to answer if anybody asks. And this the numerator also have electronic conductivity, and electronic conductivity is nothing but how efficient way the electron and hole, basically the charge carrier, moves in a solid material. And this sigma is directly related to the mobility by this equation. I think this is physics department, so all of you know this. Any mu, and mu is basically the mobility. Okay, so these are direct relation with mobility. But the surprisingly, S and sigma are contradictory, because S is proportional to 1 by sigma basically. Okay, so and with some proportionality constant. So this is basically related to the carrier concentration, and this relation is called Mott relation, where we have S NA. So this is the extended version of Mott equation. So this is basically contradictory. So if I have high electronic conductivity, we cannot have high Seebeck, but we want both high at a time. So this is one of the great challenge in thermoelectric, but both are related to the electronic structure of the solid. So now let's talk about the denominator, which is the main part of this talk today. The denominator is basically thermal conductivity. So what is basically thermal conductivity? So how heat is moving from, or heat is conducting in a solid material, that is called thermal conductivity. And thermal conductivity has two parts. First part is electrical part of the thermal conductivity, that is related. This is electrical part of the thermal conductivity that is related to the directly to the L sigma T, directly to the electrical part of the conductivity. So this is called Weidemann-Franz law, famous Weidemann-Franz law in solid state physics. And so that means if you want high sigma, we will have high electrical part of the thermal conductivity, that is this part. So that means that will deteriorate the ZT. So we don't have much control of this part, because we want high sigma, high electrical conductivity in a solid. But the second part of the thermal conductivity is basically the lattice vibration, that is called phonon, which is quantized lattice vibration, how it carries the heat. So this part is only the independent parameter in this equation. So we can independently tune this part, and this does not depend on electrical part of the thermal conductivity, does not depend on the electronic structure. So today's talk, I'm going to talk about how we can tune, how we can lower this lattice thermal conductivity, so that we will have ultra low thermal conductivity and we have high ZT. Okay, so now how in our lab, how we see this problem? So we see this problem in a little bit different way, but very interesting way. Basically, we need a material which will have property of glass, that is low thermal conductivity, property of metal, which will have high electrical conductivity, and property of semiconductor, which will have high Seebeck coefficient. So in a thermoelectric material, good thermoelectric material should have property of glass, metal, and semiconductor in a single material, and that is a real challenge, as you can know, because combining property of glass and metal and semiconductor in a single material is really difficult task. And but solid state chemist or solid state physicist can make new material which can have property of glass, metal, and semiconductor, and can be a good thermoelectric. So how, by logic, how we can design this material? In order to understand that part, we have to little bit understand the periodic table. So let's see in this basically chalcogenide series, which is called by oxygen, sulfur, selenium, and tellurium. The metal oxide, if I fix the metal and then go from metal oxide to metal sulfide to metal selenide to metal telluride, the band gap decreases enormously. And this band gap decreases enormously. That is due to generally the periodic property, and it can be understood by simple molecular orbital diagram, because the electronegativity increases when you go from oxygen to tellurium. So basically electronegativity decreases. Okay, when you go from electronegativity decreases heavily when you go from oxygen to tellurium. That means the level, atomic level goes up, and automatically the band gap decreases in tellurides. And then generally the tellurides, heavy metal bed tellurides, having a band gap around 0.1 to 0.2 or even below 0.5 electron volt. So once you have a very low band gap, basically this can act as a semi metal once you dope heavily and get like conductivity like metal. So this property satisfies once you work with heavy metal based tellurides. And as this is a semiconductor, still a semiconductor, because it has basically small band gap, it gives reasonably Seebeck coefficient. So we have two properties satisfied that down the periodic table. Now if we construct the lattice with heavy metal like lead or tin or tellurium or selenium or even germanium, the lattice vibration actually becomes slow, because if we have heavier elements, automatically the lattice will vibrate very slowly and will give rise to low phonon velocity. That means the low thermal conductivity. Will get glass-like thermal conductivity if we construct the lattice with heavy metal. So basically, we have to choose heavy metal-based tellurides, selenides, or even to some extent sulfides or telluride selenides are better, which are having low band gap and consisting of heavy mass that can have property like low thermal conductivity like glass and high electrical conductivity like metal. So all these three property basically converge actually down the periodic table, and you can make new material if your logic is good. So that is the simple chemistry to design a new material in this field. Okay. So now if you see this plot, this is a very famous plot from this paper, Cambridge in 2016. It shows that there are three generation of material in thermoelectric. So this is ZT versus discovery of ER and the temperature. The first generation of material will have ZT below 1. Second generation of material will have ZT basically below 2. And third generation material will just cross ZT above 2, which is discovered first time in 2012 for bulk material. Okay, but third generation of material, if you see, most of the materials are lead based. As I told you, heavy metal based tellurides are extremely important, but people have chosen lead based material. But these lead based material are not not highly welcome in the industry for mass market application, because lead, as you know, lead is toxic. So another grand challenge in this field, how to discover new material with high performance, basically lead free material with high performance. So generally, market-based thermoelectric devices are having the ZT of 1, which is generally first generation material, which can show efficiency. Generally, this is a theoretical efficiency, but generally the efficiency will show in this window generally 8%. Okay, so now if we can have a material which is lead free and ZT of 2, actually we can have efficiency close to 20%, or say 15 to 20% in that regime. So once we have that kind of material, and there are few material in the now labs, different labs discovered in the world, which can go to the market and make revolution in the field of waste heat recovery to power generation. Okay, so now with that, I come to my lab capabilities. We can synthesize this heavy metal based selenide, telluride, and sulfides significantly in the form of bulk material by vacuum seal tube reaction, or we have spark plasma sintering to give high dense sample. We can grow single crystal by Brisbane furnace as well as dual zone Also, we can make nanoparticles by snake line reaction, by different tuning the chemistry of the reaction. Because we have capability to grow different kind of sample in this field, from bulk to nano to high dense to single crystal. Okay, so now I come back to lattice thermal conductivity, which is nothing but the how phonon moves in a material. So lattice thermal conductivity is an extremely important part because it carries the most about the heat in a solid material. So now this is the crystal lattice, and then crystal lattice are formed by basically atoms, and this lattice vibration gives rise to this quantized vibration, which is called phonon. And this phonon wavelength, which generally carry heat in these tellurides and selenites, are in the range of 1 angstrom to 100 nanometer. So basically, we have to, if we wanted to decrease the thermal conductivity, one way to do it, basically how we can block this phonon movement, so that phonon will not pass from one end of a solid to another end. So how to do is, basically, we have to have some object which will have similar size of the phonon wavelength. So I'll come in a minute how we can do it. Before going to that, another important part we have to tell, there are two kinds of phonon. One is acoustic phonon. This is a cartoon diagram which starts from 0. It's called acoustic phonon, as you can see from the name. So acoustic phonons are basically when all the atom in a lattice vibrates in same direction, and this is basically directly related to the sound velocity in a solid material. So you can see from the name, acoustic phonons are directly related to basically sound velocity in a material. So you can calculate the lattice thermal conductivity if you know sound velocity of a solid material, and then acoustic phonons are having this mean free path which actually carries the heat in a solid material. So there are another kind of phonon which is called optical phonon, and these optical phonons are nothing but when atoms in a lattice vibrates in different direction, and this gives rise to create dipole, and this that's why this optical name came is optical, which can be determined by Raman spectroscopy or IR spectroscopy or terahertz spectroscopy. So that's why the name came optical phonon. So, but in a normal material, you will have always a gap between optical and acoustic phonon. So this slide I'll come back once I proceed with my talk in the later part of this seminar. But please remember there is two kinds of phonon. One is acoustic phonon, which is nothing but the sound wave which carries the heat, and there are another kind of phonon which is the optical phonon, which can be tracked by Raman IR or different optical spectroscopic technique. Okay, so now how to scatter this acoustic phonon, which is having the wavelength of 1 angstrom 100 nanometer. So this is the cartoon diagram how phonon scattering generally happen in a solid thermoelectric matrix. So the phonon which are having 2 to 20 nanometer are the main carrier of heat. So in 60-70 years back, Russian people, what they have done, they have actually created point defects. So they have made solid solution like say Pb Te 1 - X AC. So they substituted some amount of tellurium with selenium. So that kind creates atomic defects, which is actually in the order of angstrom, so below 1 angstrom, which actually scatters basically short wavelength phonon. But those short wavelength phonon does not contribute much to the thermal conductivity. Phonons which contribute heat carrying in solid, basically having the mean free wavelength of 2 to 20 nanometer. So people purposefully put nanoprecipitate of similar size in the solid matrix, and this nanoprecipitate actually can scatter phonon, and I'll give you example, because this is PBTE lattice. This is the measured lattice thermal conductivity versus temperature plot for lead telluride, which is a champion material. So this blue curve shows the pristine lead telluride. But once you have this kind of point defects, there is a significant, not significant, there is a minimum amount of decrease in the lattice thermal conductivity once you have point defect. This is known for last 60 years from Russians. But when this paper came in 2004, first time they showed ultra low lattice thermal conductivity in this last 18 material. Last means it has lead for L, and then A for antimony, S for silver, and T for tellurium, because this is a lead telluride based material which having the matrix is lead telluride, but full matrix is lead telluride, but it has nanoprecipitate of silver and antimony rich, which are having the similar size of the wavelength or mean free path of the heat carrying phonon. So once you have this nanoparticle embedded in a matrix, so you can scatter a phonon heavily and can give rise to ultra low thermal conductivity. So this science paper in 2004 actually given the birth of this field called nanostructured bulk thermoelectrics. But the material is bulk, but the bulk material inside these nanoparticles are embedded in the matrix, which scatters the phonon of late telluride. So later there are several important papers came in this field, engineering the microstructure and nanostructure by creating different kind of nanoprecipitates, different kind of grain boundaries and grains. And there are several important papers came in this field, and paper came out from the Samsung industry as well, from Korea, this science paper. And also we have contributed significantly in this field from India by creating different nanostructure like two-dimensional nanostructure, rod-shaped nanostructure, different nanostructure, which can give like significant amount of phonon scattering. But today I'm not going to talk about this nanostructuring. Okay, so because so there is a drawback in this extrinsic nanostructuring approach, because with time we have realized these nanostructures in a matrix can scatter phonon significantly. It will decrease thermal conductivity extremely good way, but at the same time it will decrease the mobility because it will scatter but defects dislocation in the boundary. It will scatter basically electron and hole. So we will see decrease in electrical conductivity as well. Okay, so that means we are compromising with the numerator part of the ZT. Once we introduce point defects, nanoprecipitates and grain boundary. So this is more like a materials engineering aspect. Okay, so now can we make new system which will not have all these things, will not have this phonon, nanoprecipitate or grain boundary, but we will have intrinsically low thermal conductivity. So basically what is the goal? Basically goal is making a new material which will have very low thermal conductivity without doing any engineering aspect. So that means we have to work with more fundamental chemistry and physics of that material. Okay, so that means we have to work with chemical bonding and lattice dynamics, which are more fundamental than doing creating nanostructure or microstructure. So let's see how we can do it. So now I'll give an example from our lab, which is published in 2019. So we have synthesized a compound called thallium Fe, and thallium Fe is once we synthesize this and we measure the thermal conductivity, see the values of thermal conductivity, which is ultra low value, is touching towards the theoretical minima of the thermal conductivity in thallium Fe, and it's much lower than the material like PBT, SNT, GET or scutterolite or even Mg, Ag, Sb. This is very famous material now, even bismuth telluride, bismuth selenide based material. So now this material we have not done any nanostructuring or mesostructuring or microstructuring. We have not touched any engineering aspect. But still we see ultra low thermal conductivity. This work has been done by Moinak, who is my PhD student. So now why we see low thermal conductivity? In order to understand that, we have to understand basically the structural part very good way. So in order to do that, we have solved the structure and we have find it out bonding hierarchy in this material. So I'll come in a minute what is called bonding hierarchy. But it will be surprising why we choose suddenly this material, from where from we choose this material. Because if you analyze the oxidation state of this material, you will understand the logic. Basically selenium is 2- oxidation state. By simple valence counting, thallium can be +2. But thallium +2 is actually not possible. Okay, so we'll have +2 is not possible. So we'll have just a minute. Thallium +2 is not possible. So we will have basically sorry. So we will have here thallium. What is that? Just a minute. Thallium +2 is not possible. So this compound is mixed valent. We have thallium +1 and +3 because thallium electronic configuration is generally NH2 NP1. Okay, so we either 3 electron goes, we have +3, or 1 electron goes, we will have thallium +1, which is having a NH2 lone pair in there. So this lone pair is extremely important in this compound. Now if we come to the structure, this thallium plus 1, which is having a NH2 rather than actually 6s2 lone pair, is formed this tetrahedra with tellurium. Okay, and this tetrahedra runs in one-dimensional fashion, and you will see this one-dimensional channel type of structure. Now thallium plus 3, which does not have a lone pair, form this weak or longer ionic bonding with tellurium. So basically there are this thallium plus 3 basically this is thallium plus 3 and this is thallium plus 1 with a this is with a lone pair. This is a lone pair, and this thallium plus 3 forms the stronger covalent bonding, whereas thallium plus 1 sits in this channel with a lone pair. So let's see what we understood from this structure. We have a stronger bonding framework, the shorter bonding you can see, and weaker bonding framework in the same material. Okay, so now we have created purposefully bonding hierarchy in the same material, and we have weakly bonded thallium plus 1 sitting in this channel. So now what we propose from our chemical intuition or physical intuition, basically thallium plus 1, this has a weaker bonding, has a lone pair, so it has having a intrinsic instability, and this instability, because of this instability, actually this thallium plus 1 back and forth rattle in this channel, and this rattling actually can give rise to low energy optical phonon modes. So what I am saying, this rattling can give slow vibration of thallium plus 1 can give rise to very low energy optical phonon modes. And what I am meaning, these optical phonon modes, this I'll go back to the slide. This is the optical phonon modes. You remember I said for a normal semiconductor, there is a normal solid, there will be always gap between optical acoustics. So now this thallium plus 1 rattling will lower the energy of optical phonon, and we'll have optical phonon very near to this acoustic phonon. So basically this optical phonon will scatter the acoustic phonon. That's what I mean to say here. So optical acoustic coupling or optical acoustic hybridization will happen, and that gives rise to ultra low thermal conductivity in this material. Okay, so that was the logic we have and chemical intuition we have from structural analysis. Then we plotted the charge density, valence charge density. As you can see, this is the thallium plus 3, this is the plus 3, and this is the tellurium 2 minus, a selenium 2 minus. It forms nice electron sharing. This is the covalent bonding. But thallium plus 1, which is having this spherical lone pair, sits in this channel, and that can having weaker bonding, so it can rattle. And then we have calculated the electron localization function, which also shows the lone pair. And then if you draw here potential energy curve for each atom, you can see this thallium plus 1, which is blue, sits in a very flat potential wave. That means it has a weaker force constant, so it can rattle and give rise to low energy optical phonon, which can scatter acoustic phonon and give rise to ultra low thermal conductivity. Now you can ask me question, okay, so now how we make sure that actually thallium is rattling? Okay, so that we can do by doing calculation of basically phonon dispersion, and you can see this is a real phonon dispersion, and the first 3 modes are acoustic modes, as I told you from the cartoon, and this is the optical modes, the modes coming from 0 are acoustic mode, which actually carries the heat, and these optical modes actually interacts with this acoustic mode, and this is called basically optical acoustic coupling, and these modes are coming from this rattler of thallium plus 1. You can see if you do the mode analysis by atom projected phonon density of states, you can see here basically these modes the EG modes are from the blue atom is coming from thallium plus 1. So basically we indirectly prove or directly give the support. Basically this thallium rattling is happening, which gives rise to low energy optical phonon modes. Okay, and we have very high Gunderson parameter that tells that system is highly anharmonic, really anharmonic system. Okay, so now with that, basically we have done low temperature heat capacity, because we have to show by experiment. Theoretical support is good, but that is not enough. So we have to do experiment to show this low energy optical phonon modes. But low temperature heat capacity is a although simple experiment, but it can give you a lot of information. Low temperature meaning I am telling about this is T square, so this has taken from 2 to 30 K. So this low temperature measurement you have to do. So generally this heat capacity obeys basically d by T cube law. So this basically if you take this T this side, so this is T cube law, d by T cube law. But Debye model, which generally express the normal solids, cannot fit this low temperature heat capacity. So we have to have Einstein mode, invoke Einstein mode in this equation to fit. And what this Einstein mode explains, so once we invoke this Debye-Einstein model, basically it fits nicely this heat capacity. These Einstein modes are nothing but basically the Rattler mode. So what basically, yeah?
So the slides are not changing, it remains same.
So now okay?
No, like.
Huh?
Yeah.
So what do I do now?
Actually, we can feed now, but earlier the slides. Now it's changing.
Now it's changing.
Yeah. Earlier it was on 17th slide only.
Oh my God! Sorry. I'm extremely sorry. So what do I do? Again share?
Yes. Yeah, you can again share, sir.
Yeah, sorry. Just a moment. Yeah, you could have told me earlier, like something happened in between, I guess. Now it's okay. You can see again.
Yes.
Okay. 17th slide, right? Yeah. So this part was clear, right? Like how we talked about the Rattler from this weak ionic bonding, and from there, basically, as I told that it's in a very shallow potential well, this thallium atom that actually give rise to rattling. And as you can see from phonon calculation, so basically what I want to say, these three modes we starting from 0. This is the real phonon calculation for this compound. These are acoustic mode, and you have basically these optical modes which are coming from this rattling. Okay, so basically what I mean here, as the slide has not changed, I'll go back here. So I told you this acoustic mode is carrying the heat, and this normal semiconductor you have these optical modes. What we have done is actually we lowered down this frequency of these optical modes by slow vibration or rattling of thallium, and this optical and acoustic coupling is happening. And this optical acoustic hybridization gives rise to ultra low thermal conductivity here. And this optical mode, low optical mode is coming from the thallium rattler. Yeah. Okay. So basically, this is the optical mode, and this is the acoustic mode. Okay. So this coupling is happening, and if you can do mode analysis by calculating the atom projected phonon loss, you can see these blue low energy modes, optical modes, are nothing but coming from the thallium atom. So that gives us a proof of rattling mode. So now this is theory is nice, but you have to give a experimental evidence of this rattling. This is the low temperature heat capacity data starting from 2 to 30 Kelvin range, and this low temperature heat capacity data cannot be fitted by Debye model alone. This is the Debye part, and this is the electronic part. So this Debye electronic part cannot fit this data. So we have to invoke Einstein mode. This is the Einstein mode in this equation, and this once we have Einstein mode, this low temperature heat capacity data fitted extremely well. So what Einstein assumed, basically in a Debye solid, Einstein assumes a single atom as a rattler. So this rattler mode actually we can estimate from this low temperature heat capacity data, which are ultra low energy, is having around 15 centimeter, 30 centimeter, or 51 centimeter, which was calculated by theory as well. So this is in that terahertz, basically in the same region, only the unit is different. So and then once we plot Cp by Tq versus T, we can see basically this peak-like feature in the experimental data, and this peak-like feature is basically gives indication of boson-like harm, and this boson-like harm, name after our famous scientist Satyendranath Bose. Basically, this observed in disordered glasses, and this is basically the excess optical phonon density of states, which coming from the thallium rattling, and which gives rise to the optical acoustic coupling and lowering the thermal conductivity of a material. Okay, so now can we have, because see optical phonon modes, as I told you in the beginning, this optical phonon mode can be seen by Raman, terahertz, or IR spectroscopy. So can we see directly by experiment these rattler modes? Actually, yes. Fortunately, this compound has centrosymmetric space group, so that it will have it will obey mutual exclusion principle. So that means some mode will be Raman active, some mode will be IR active. So we have done first Raman. You can see these EG modes, which is predicted by theory as well as our chemical intuition. These modes can be seen now, and these are the rattler modes, and A2U and EU modes basically seen by terahertz spectroscopy. So which is done by collaboration with Pankaj Mondal from ISR Pune, because he's expert in terahertz. So that means we can see these Ratlan modes, and these Ratlan modes are coming from thallium plasmon. So this is more like more fundamental work than doing actually nanostructuring. So the take-home message should be from there. Basically, someone has to create basically this bonding hierarchy, intrinsic bonding hierarchy, strong bonding framework and weak bonding framework. And the strong bonding framework will takes care about the charge transport, whereas the weak bonding framework basically takes care about the phonon transport. So we are actually decoupling the electronic as well as decoupling of electronic as well as decoupling of electronic and phonon part into different bonding or different sublattices in a material, which actually give rise to ultra low thermal conductivity. Okay, so this is the first example I have given about intrinsically low thermal conductivity without doing nano, meso, or microstructuring or point defects. Okay, so now I'll show another example. I think in next 10 minutes or so. Basically, how we can again tune the thermal conductivity of tin telluride, and tin telluride now it's a famous material in thermoelectric. But when we started working in tin telluride in 2012, tin telluride was exactly neglected in solid state physics, solid state chemistry, as well as thermoelectric community, because it has basically very high carrier concentration, because thermal conductivity is also high, as well as electronic conductivity is extremely high like metal, but we want something in between metal and semiconductor. And then we have optimized the electronic structure of the tin telluride and made it, it is a good thermoelectric. And so one student has done thesis based on this tin telluride. But I'm not going to talk about today about the electronic structure. I'm going to talk about mostly about the phonon part, that is the thermal conductivity part of tin telluride. So this is the pristine tin telluride thermal conductivity, which is starting from 2.9 or 3 watt per meter Kelvin and going up to 1.1, 1.2 watt per meter Kelvin. So one can calculate theoretical minima of the thermal conductivity. This is the K minima. Once we have information about sound velocity, because sound velocity directly relates to the acoustic phonon, which carries the heat in a material, as I told you. So now minimum thermal conductivity, theoretical minima is around 0.5. So can we decrease from here to here? So that is the challenge when we started working in thermal conductivity in tin telluride back in 2014-15. Okay, so then we see actually for low thermal conductivity we need soft optical phonon modes. Soft means low energy optical phonon mode, as we see from the last example. So very low energy soft vibration we have to have. Now another field, I'm sure some of you know, basically called ferroelectricity, and this ferroelectricity is coming generally arising in a material for softening of polar optical phonon. Okay, now we can see the phonon spectra of tin telluride. For a cubic tin telluride has basically this rock salt structure. I should tell this rock salt structure is basically sodium chloride structure, non-centrosymmetric rock salt structure, which is also a structure of lead telluride. This rock salt structure is stable at room temperature or above, but very low temperature tin telluride forms rhomboidal phase, which is non-centrosymmetric. That's why if you calculate the phonon of tin telluride of this rock salt phase, basically you see this optical phonon instability, very small instability, and this is called the ferroelectric instability in tin telluride. And you can see that there are papers published in 1970s, even from Japan, which showed that there is a ferroelectric transition in tin telluride basically below 100 Kelvin. So now we ask the question, can we combine these two fields, ferroelectric instability and low thermal conductivity, to have a high safety? Because these two fields are connected with the soft optical phonon. Okay, so that was the idea, and this is more like fundamental intrinsic parameter. You can play around with bonding and structure in this. So in order to do that, we purposefully dope germanium around 20 to 30%. Once we put germanium, the ferroelectric TC turns out to be near room temperature, because this is the DSC curve. This 30% germanium we dope in tin telluride. Now we can ask question like, why suddenly so many elements are there in periodic table with dope germanium? So because you can see from this, sorry, I'll go back to this slide again. Yeah. So germanium sits just above the tin telluride. So that means if you go up of the periodic table, the lone pair try to express, because the you all know about inert lone pair effect, but inert lone pair effect comes generally if you down the periodic table. So we purposefully put germanium in tin, so that germanium 4s2 lone pair actually distort the local structure. Okay, so because it will express the lone pair and it will distort the local structure. Once it distorts the local structure, the compound will be locally distorted, but globally it will be cubic. So that was the idea. So and then we have with collaboration with Umesh actually calculated basically the phonon dispersion, and this was extremely significant phonon instability, and this is ferroelectric instability in this composition. And see the instability in pristine tin telluride, it's small, whereas the instability in germanium tin telluride is extremely high. And if you do this analysis here, we see the instability except R point, all the point in the brilliant zone. That means if you do the Fourier transform, we can understand there is a local off-centering of germanium in the lattice, and that coming from the 4s2 lone pair of the germanium, because 4s2 lone pair germanium is much more active than the tin lone pair. Okay, so that forms local off-centering region in a global cubic structure. So what I mean, the global structure is cubic, rock salt structure about room temperature or at room temperature, but the local structure, it forms local ferroelectric domains because of local off-centering. Okay, so now the question is how to observe experimentally again. Okay, so in order to do that, we have done Raman spectroscopy, because Raman spectroscopy can track this low energy optical phonon modes. You see, this is 20% sample. We don't see any low energy optical phonon modes. As soon as 30% sample room temperature Raman spectroscopy, you see these low energy optical phonon modes, which are 19, 27, and 36 centimeter inverse. And this is coming actually from the ferroelectric instability in this material. Okay, so this let's see now you can ask me question. Okay, how do you know from experiment germanium is actually distorted locally, not globally? Okay, so in order to do that, we have to do a sophisticated experiment called synchrotron X-ray pair distribution function analysis for student and also for faculty. So I'll give in a simplistic way how these experiments are done. Basically, all we know. The different region of X-ray. This is the different length scale of X-ray. Basically, this is small angular X-ray scattering. Then we have powder X-ray diffraction, and then we have PGA. Okay, local structure. Now this is plotted with vector Q, and Q is nothing but basically 4 pi sin theta by lambda. This is called a scattering vector. 4 pi sin theta by lambda, and all we know what is lambda in Bragg's law. Okay, so now I'll give a simple example of a gold nanoparticle. Okay, in a gold nanoparticle and high concentration of gold nanoparticle solid. Okay, so if we have two gold nanoparticle nearby, basically the distance between two gold nanoparticle can be tracked by small angle X-ray scattering, very low angle X-ray. And if we Fourier transform it, we will go to particle distance. That is the macromolecular unit. So we can go to distance about say 4 to 5 nanometer, even 10 nanometer. Okay. Now, if I do a powder X-ray of this gold nanoparticle, we'll see lattice plane. And this lattice plane comes here if you do the Fourier transform. Now if you do very high Q data, what if we Fourier transform it? Basically, we can get atom distances. Basically, we can zoom down, basically zoom into gold distances in this material. Okay. So from nanoparticle distance from sacs to lattice plane to atom distance, that is basically bond. If you want to track, we have to do the paired distribution part of the X-ray. So now we know this is X-ray. So this is low angle X-ray, small angle X-ray scattering. This is basically powder X-ray diffraction. All we do every day in our lab, but we neglect this data, this very flat region. Okay. So now if we take this data in synchrotron, we get very high signal to noise ratio. And if we Fourier transform from these repels are basically the bond distances from this data. So from this region to we have to go down to atom distances. So basically this first peak is basically germanium tellurium distance or tin tellurium distance. The second peak is the second nearest neighbor, that is the tellurium distance, and the third one is maybe tin or tin germanium distance, something like that. So that means if the fitting is good with a crystallography model for the first two peaks, the local structure is well described. But fitting is worst in the case of higher R values. That means the global structure is not well described, and it's vice versa. So that means we have to seek fitting for both local peak as well as global peak for this X-ray pair distribution function, so that we can explain both local and global structure at the same time. Okay. So now how to do it? We have focused on this first peak, which is basically germanium tellurium distance, And then you can see here with cubic model, which is a rock salt model for the germanium doped sample, the global structure is R value is extremely good and the fitted well, but the local structure cannot be fitted well. R value is high. So then we have distorted the germanium along the rhomboidal direction, that is the 1-1-1 direction in a cube. The local structure fitted extremely well. That means germanium is distorted locally, but global structure is not fitted well. R value increases. But that means we have this scenario. Local structure, the germanium is distorted, but global structure, this germanium distortion is less. So it averages out and this gives rise to centrosymmetric structure. So this locally, this germanium distortion is coming from actually germanium lone pair, as I told you, and that we showed by now experiment. And this off-centering of germanium is only 0.1 angstrom. That is the 10% of a bond length, and that is quite huge actually to give a ferroelectric instability and low energy optical phonon modes, as you see from the calculation. And these give rise to extremely low thermal conductivity in this material. And this is really intrinsic factor because we don't have nanostructuring or mesostructuring or microstructuring in this material. And that comes from basically combining these two fields, ferroelectric instability and thermoelectrics. First time we have combined and we get a really high ZT in this material, around 1.6 in lead-free system. So now with that, I'll complete in another 4-5 minutes, saying few more example. Basically, this tin selenide, which is a sensation in thermoelectric in last couple of years, because it's three important paper, one Nature and 2 Science paper came in last 4 years about this tin selenide, where it shows it has layered structure, and due to this layered structure, it has significant amount of anharmonicity. On all of you know, I think anharmonic potential like Morse potential and all. So it has anharmonic bonding, anharmonic lattice, and which gives rise to ultra low thermal conductivity. And in single crystal form, please remember, in single crystal form, it gives ZT close to 3. Okay, so that we know, but for real purpose, this single crystal cannot be used. We have to have polycrystal or nanocrystal. So in our lab, first time we have synthesized germanium doped tin selenide nanoplates by simple autoclave reaction. But the trick is that you have to have 2:1 tin versus selenium ratio, so that some simple chemistry can happen. That means it can act as a reactant as well as reducing agent. If you know the details about synthesis, please read the paper. And then you see this nanoplate, and with this nanostructure, basically nanoplate, which is having significant bond anharmonicity and lattice anharmonicity, we say ZT of above 2, and this is one of the highest in simple nanoparticle or nanoplates, and which is done by my student Shushmita. And with that, I'll complete the talk because we are touching almost the time. I'll not exceed the time here, and then we'll have to have more questions. So let me skip all these things and then come to the conclusion. Basically, before coming to the conclusion, I'll show this slide. Basically, where we stand compared to the world TE research, you can see that most of the near room temperature material are based on Bismarck telluride, which comes from South Korea, Boston, and Houston, and the high temperature material is generally lead telluride based, which we generated from Northwestern University, Beijing for SNSE, and we have also SNSE as well. But the mid temperature range, basically, we outperform others because we have our germanium telluride based material, which are third generation material, lead free, can give rise to extremely high ZT, as well as we have created basically single leg depth thermoelectric device which gives extremely high efficiency. And by seeing this progress, Tata Steel actually contacted us, as I told you beginning of the talk, because any kind of power plant can have a lot of waste heat, and Tata Steel, as you know, it has significant amount of waste heat in the blast furnaces, and these blast furnaces are cooled by this water line. So they wanted to keep thermoelectric devices in this water line where they have a huge amount of waste heat. So we are collaborating with this to put devices, and we have actually get good amount of progress in this project. With that, I conclude that basically intrinsically low thermal conductivity is an attractive paradigm for developing high performance thermoelectric. We can create thermal conductivity, low thermal conductivity by playing with chemical bonding and lattice dynamics, basically coexisting rigid and covalent substructure in a single material. So we can have phonon glass electron crystal type solid, and we can also engineer ferroelectric instability in a thermoelectric material. I showed you some of the examples. And how you choose compound, you have to choose basically heavy metal based tellurides and selenides. I have given you the logic, but if you have a lone pair or high atomic displacement parameter, I think that can give rise to low thermal conductivity. But fundamental understanding of chemical bonding, crystal structure, both local versus global structure, and its correlation with lattice dynamics are the key to generate new low thermal conductive material for thermoelectric. With that, I thank all of my students who has done extremely good work in the field of low thermal conductivity of thermoelectric. Also, I have excellent collaborators from JNCSR and different ISRs as well as IIT and also from Tata Steel. And also I have generous funding from SERB DST as well as Tata Steel, Sheikh Shakar Laboratory, and when I joined in 2012 about my seed grant about the new chemistry unit, and of course enormous support from JNCSR. With that, I close my talk, and I will be happy to answer a few questions if you have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the excellent and detailed talk covering both physics and chemistry of the thermoelectric material. In particular, how to reduce the thermal conductivity using phononic contribution. Now I request the participants to unmute yourself and discuss with the speaker. The session is open for discussion. Sir, I have a quick question. So you have covered the other materials. What about these oxides? For example, the strontium titanates and niobium doped strontium titanate. Also.
See, oxides, actually, I don't see much hope is there in oxide, because oxides are extremely good material for other applications like superconductivity, ferroelectrics, magnetism. But if you remember this diagram, what I presented here, I think you can see, right?
Yes, yes.
You can see, right? So what I'm meaning is oxide will have very, very high band gap. Okay, so the conductivity may not match this telluride. At the same time, these oxides are basically low mass, right? So you will start with very, very high thermal conductivity. So both this property does not converge in oxide.
Okay.
Because you will start with 20 watt per meter Kelvin. But for base oxide have thermal conductivity of say 4-5 meter or 3 to 4-5 watt per meter Kelvin. But we are talking about in the terms of 0.3, 0.4, right?
Okay.
So that is the drawback of oxide. So whatever you do, if you get a very high ZT in oxide, that is the actually real breakthrough in this field. But looks like thermal conductivity is extremely high, so it cannot be feasible. That one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions from participants?
I think somebody typed in chat box. I cannot see the chat box.
Not.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, myself Manimuri. Sir, I'm having a simple question.
Yeah.
For example, when increasing the thermal conductivity decreases with increasing the temperatures, so what is the reason, maybe which influences the?
Okay. So it's a very good question. So basically, see what you are asking. If I understand correctly, you are asking basically why with high temperature increase there is a decrease in thermal conductivity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So basically, when you increase the temperature, this acoustic phonon will scatter among themselves. Okay. So this phonon scattering happens. It's called Umklapp process in physics. Okay. Because this phonon itself is scattered with phonon and it dies out. Okay. So that's why general trend you should see there will be 1/T dependence because with temperature the thermal conductivity decreases. But if you see some of the material, this temperature dependence we don't see because those are beyond that basically. So those are basically when you create huge anharmonicity, so those other effect dominates. So then you don't see, you see a flat thermal conductivity.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir, one question in chat box.
Yeah.
In addition to figure of merit, how to improve the efficiency of the device?
Okay, very good. So this is, see, in thermoelectric there are different subfields. Okay, so I should tell in the beginning, but maybe I missed the points because see in thermoelectric itself there is a field called what I talked today, how to decrease the thermal conductivity. So there is another subfield, how to increase the Seebeck coefficient. how to work with electronic structure. So there are two fields, like how to do electronic structure, how to do modulate phonon structure. So now another third subfield is basically engineering. Once you get a high ZT material, how you construct device, and that is called device engineering. So for that you have to work with basically brazing material, contact material. So those are more engineering way to do research or contribute in the field. So that we do. We have a 10% contribution, like 10% work. We give time in our group, because we are not engineering group, but we are learning that. But that can be done by changing contact material, doing spark plasma sintering. So we have a device group, but one can give a, like another half an hour talk on that. So, but there is no simple recipe you can get very good device basically. So those are mostly trial and error method basically.
Sir, since you mentioned this spark plasma sintering,
Yeah.
so what is the influence of a method of preparation on the thermal conductivity part?
Yeah, so that is again good question, because see, spark plasma sintering, see, generally we in physics department you must be having cold press, right? Cold press, like you make pellet, right?
Yes.
Is it cold press? You give some megapascal, not even megapascal, like very little pressure, maybe a little bit of megapascal you give, and then make a hand press pellet. You see those pellets, very low dense pellet. Because if you have a crystal structure, you have a density, and those pellets will not even 85-80% density. So once you measure this electrical property, it may not be true all the time, because this porosity, all these things, artifact may come. So now, from a measurement perspective, once you do spark plasma sintering, that you can do it in 2-3 minutes, and the pellet will have a density of 90-99%. So the data is extremely authentic. So now, if you use like some mechanical alloying or ball milling with spark plasma sintering, so you can actually arrest nanoscale or microscale grains in the material. Because spark plasma sintering is basically, you are not doing for high temperature, very higher longer time. You are doing for 2-3 minutes, but high temperature and high pressure, like very high pressure, like 60 megapascal or some 50 megapascal something, and very short time. So we can arrest those small grain, and those small grain and small nanostructure can actually give rise to very low thermal conductivity because of phonon scattering. Okay, so this the SPS is a very good technique, and then you can make contact in SPS for a device as well.
Sir, very excellent talk, sir. Kanishka sir. So I have some couple of questions. Like
please.
So what do you think about the scope for thin films for thermoelectrics?
Yeah, because see, thin film, a lot of work happened. Here also we have a group, one of my junior here joined, his name is Vivas, he's doing really good in thin film. But thin film problem is that, like, measurement is a big issue, like extremely big issue, because thin film, whatever even, I should not tell in public, but whatever the Nature paper came in this year, like a lot of controversy in that thin film paper, in Harvard, right?
Yes.
So basically those data, it looks like there are few groups, they could not reproduce it. So, and even thin film has claimed high ZT, even in bismuth telluride from US in 2000, I think 2002 or 2003. 3 ZT they claim, but nobody could reproduce that data, because the measurement of the thermal conductivity measurement. Because thermal conductivity measurement is extremely tricky in thin film, and I don't think India, any group is there who can convincingly measure, because there are few groups in the world can measure good thin film thermal conductivity. One in Urbana Sample, one in Berkeley Lab. But one should work in this direction, because thin film has a good application. Because you can have a very good application of thin film if somebody actually claims really authentic data in thin film.
Okay.
But thin film fundamental research has to be done first, very good way, and then measurement, like how to do measurement research basically. Because bulk measurement is much easier and authentic basically. With thin film, there is no commercial machine you can measure thermal conductivity.
Yes,
you have to build your own machine. Yes. And once you build, people are not expert, they do a mistake.
Yes. And I have one more question. So how about this 2D materials for thermoelectric applications?
Yeah, so there, I given you the, last example, SNSC. This is the 2D material, right?
Yeah.
Layered material. So layered material actually are extremely important for thermoelectric, because those are highly anharmonic system. It can give low thermal conductivity.
Yes.
So you can see, like, we have a recent perspective in Journal of Material Chemistry. We have reviewed about, it's a very long review. We have reviewed all the 2D material there, which are good thermoelectric.
Okay.
That may be helpful for you to like read and see like what are the 2D material there. But 2D material has a big future in this field.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, in XRD, it's showing multi-phases in some percentage like 60, 30, like that. We can say it is a nanoprecipitate or it is a multi-phase material.
No. Could you please repeat your question? I didn't get your.
Sir, in XRD results, it's showing the multi-phase.
Which
like,
XRD?
And powder XRD. After refinement of
No, this is my sample or your sample?
my sample.
Oh, that's what you tell first.
Generally, I'm asking.
Okay, so you are asking, you are seeing multi-phases in your X-ray, then you are not understanding this is nanostructuring or...
No, it's a we can say it's a nanoprecipitate because the percentage is nearly 60, 30, some phases in 10%, like after refinement. So can I say, can we say like a nanoprecipitate or a
No, see, of course, see, this problem is more fundamental. So once you say, see another second phase in your X-ray, that means you have a phase separation. Okay. So phase separation can form bulk, it can form microprecipitate, it can form nanoprecipitate. That you don't know from X-ray. That you have to do microscopic analysis. Is this your phase separation in nano domain or not? If the phase separation is nano domain, then it's nanoprecipitate. Otherwise, it's microprecipitate.
Okay. Thank you.
Once you are seeing, if you are seeing peak in X-ray, probably this is microprecipitate because X-ray peaks generally shown by microprecipitate. Nanoprecipitate, you don't see peak in X-ray. You have to do TM.
Okay, sir. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. This is Suresh.
Yes, Suresh. How are you?
I'm fine, sir.
Yeah.
How are you?
Tell me, Suresh.
Yeah, very good. Sir, it is a very good talk, actually. Extremely very good talk, actually, as usual. Since you are from actually solid state chemistry, I really wanted to explain about the lone pair effect for actually influence of lone pair effect for lattice thermal conductivity for the students.
Yeah.
I think you can explain much better.
Yeah. So see, lone pair has several effects. Okay. So see, basically, once you have like if I draw here, anyway, can you see the slide?
Yes, sir. We could able to see.
Yeah.
Yes.
This slide only. So
yeah.
You know, I think some of you teach like quantum mechanics, in physics.
Correct.
You teach about harmonic oscillator, right?
Correct.
So harmonic oscillator, we have like this kind of energy versus displacement. Okay.
Yes.
Displacement like R. So we have this. Now, what we in thermoelectrics, we want anharmonicity. So we want this Morse potential, anharmonic oscillator, right? So bond has to be anharmonic, but the real bonds are generally anharmonic, right?
Yeah.
But we need more and more to like this fashion. So that phonon itself, the phonon is a wave, right? Wave, or you can say particle also. You can take wave. But in a harmonic oscillator, phonon goes like this. But for anharmonic oscillator, phonon dies down.
Yes.
Phonon dies down. So we need an anharmonicity. So actually, this lone pair can create anharmonicity. For example, you have two ends of a bonding. This is two element, and one has a lone pair like this. Automatically, like you see, this is huge anharmonicity, right? So lone pair can create anharmonicity in the system. And what Navnitan was asking, basically 2D material. Okay, so 2D material, you have basically one direction weak bonding, van der Waals bonding, another direction covalent bonding, right? So automatically you are creating anharmonicity in this material. So that's why you see phonon dies down even in 2D material. So the concept is similar to lone pair and 2D material. But at the same time, lone pair, the second effect of lone pair, what it can do, this lone pair can create instability. So this local structure or local atom, that atom which is having lone pair, which can distort little bit.
Okay.
So, and that creates local distortion, can give rise to ferroelectricity, or it can, if the distortion is slightly higher, it can give rattling. And rattling can give rise to low energy optical phonon. So it has several effects.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your wonderful talk.
Okay, thank you.
There is a question in the chat box, sir. How to Rattler atoms are selected for reducing the thermal conductivity? What are the criteria for selecting?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. Actually, I showed one line in my conclusion. The selecting criteria is basically lone pair, what Suresh asked just now. basically it is thallium plus 1 has a lone pair. Okay, so once you have a spherical lone pair, because this is thallium sits down the periodic table. Okay, and then so this generally this lone pair try to express, but that it cannot express. So this is in a compromise situation. So that time it creates an instability and rattles in this channel. And in order to select that, first, if it's the intrinsic rattler, it has to have weaker bonding framework with the other atom, ionic bonding framework. So that's what we have taken care, because channel, this atom should be free. The thallium was free, and thallium has on top of that, it has a lone pair. So it has two effects. So now for a extrinsic rattler like scutterodite has a void. Okay, and then you put guest atom in that which can rattle. So that is another way of doing rattling. But here, whatever I showed example, this is intrinsic rattler. The atom from the compound itself rattle because of weak bonding and lone pair. So that is the choosing point basically. Once you see weak bonding, or if you have the crystallographic data where you see the atomic displacement parameter, basically thermal parameter, which is anisotropic or higher value, that can give rattling.
One more question in the chat box.
Yeah.
How could we calculate KT and KL as mentioned in slide 23? Once again, we have explanation about acoustic and optical phonon mode directly related to Raman experimental results that we can relate to thermal conductivity.
Okay, so I think he asked all things. I have to give the talk again.
Yes.
Anyway, so see this slide. If you see this slide, there are two. So first he wants he or she wants calculation of the thermal conductivity, right?
Yes.
So basically thermal conductivity, total thermal conductivity, you have to measure. Okay. So once you measure thermal conductivity, basically you can calculate this electrical part of the thermal conductivity, or if you know this electrical conductivity. Okay. So this is connected by Weidemann-Franz law. So once you calculate this electrical part of the thermal conductivity, you can subtract from total thermal conductivity what you measured, you can get lattice thermal conductivity. Now, okay, the next part of the question is basically optical and acoustic phonon. Acoustic phonon is nothing but the sound wave. If you understand what is sound wave, that is acoustic phonon. And acoustic phonon, all the atom vibrates in same direction, and optical phonon, the atom vibrates in different direction. And now how to engineer this optical phonon, I showed by different rattling, ferroelectric instability, and different things. So now this optical phonon can be tracked by Raman or IR spectroscopy. So as you know, if you have a low energy filter in your Raman spectrometer, you can track this low energy optical phonons. And if you are fortunate, your system can be centrosymmetric, so you can have some phonon will come shown in Raman and some phonon will come in IR, which is coming from principle of mutual exclusion. Okay, this is the shortest description I can give right now.
Any other questions from participants? You can directly ask, you can unmute yourself, you can ask questions.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, I have one doubt, sir.
Yeah,
sir, many research have reported semiconducting material only suitable for thermoelectric applications. Right, sir? Sir, yeah. But some chalcogenide material, for example, silver selenide, copper selenide also has some phase transition. After 120 degrees Celsius, it will go to superionic conducting nature.
Right. No. See, you are confusing with superconductor with superionic conductor. Those are still semiconductor, but ion moves. Those are not superconductor. Okay. Yes, superconductor is electronic conductivity. Super ionicity is ionic conductivity. But those are semiconductor.
Okay.
Okay.
That is fine.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, so if there are no more further questions, please join with me to thank Professor Kanishka Biswas for the excellent talk on thermoelectric materials. So on behalf of the organizing committee and the Nanotechnology Research Center SRM IST, I thank you for accepting our invitation and giving an excellent talk, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for invitation, and I feel always happy to interact with all of you whenever I talk here. Okay.
Sure, sir. Once the situation is over, I hope we will invite you again to give a physical talk in the campus.
Yeah. I think I have gone already. I think 2 times. I think 2-3 times, right, Namrita?
Yes, sir. Two
Last
times.
year, yeah.
But always I'll have to interact with you because people are interested in thermoelectric and also ask important questions. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But anyway, we have actually our icon conference also. You will be going to give your talk on icon.
That will be nanostructure.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That's that I wanted to tell you. Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all of you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Be safe. Yeah.
Thank you.
So participants, we close the morning session with this, and again we will meet at 1:40 p.m. I repeat, we will meet again at 1:40 p.m. Thank you.